They say a hotel is just a place to sleep, a stop between destinations. But what if the room you check into isn't supposed to exist? What if you wake up and no one remembers your floor, your key doesn't work, and the front desk insists they've never seen you before? This isn't fiction. These are stories from people who stumbled into rooms erased from reality, corridors that loop endlessly, and doors that lead to something far worse than forgotten reservations. Tonight on Farcical Fears, we open the latch on the unknown. So if you're brave enough to check in, make sure you subscribe now. Like this video, and ring the bell icon, because every click pulls you deeper into the horror. Don't worry, we'll leave the light on, even if the hallway behind you doesn't. Let's move to our first story. I was on a routine work trip to Boston. Nothing unusual, just meetings, airport food, hotel lobbies. But when everything wrapped up a day early, I found myself with unexpected free time. Rather than change my flight, I decided to explore a quieter corner of Massachusetts. I figured I'd find a cheap room somewhere rural and catch up on sleep before heading back. That night, scrolling through hotel apps in the back of a cab, I came across something that wasn't on any of the mainstream booking platforms. It was a strange standalone listing, the Hill Ridge, in room 313, available tonight only. There were no photos, no reviews. The description simply read, historic charm with full privacy. 1 guest per night. Must arrive before sundown. Normally, I would have kept scrolling, but something about the listing was magnetic. Like the way you can't help but stare at a bad accident. And the rate, $23.13, seemed too random to be a scam, and oddly specific. I booked it without thinking. As soon as the confirmation email hit my inbox, the listing disappeared from the site. I arrived just after 7 p.m. The sun was beginning to set behind the thick woods that surrounded the place. The Hill Ridge Inn was tucked far off a narrow 2-lane road, almost like it didn't want to be found. There were no other cars in the lot, and no exterior lights, just a single warm glow in the front lobby. The man at the front desk didn't ask for ID. He barely spoke. He handed me an actual brass key, the old-fashioned kind, heavy and ornate, attached to a leather tag that read 313. He simply said, "Top floor, end of the hall. Keep the key with you." I asked if there was parking in the back. He didn't respond. The elevator looked like it hadn't worked since the 60s. So I took the stairs, creaky, wooden, narrow. The wallpaper on each landing grew more faded the higher I went, and the light bulbs buzzed overhead. I counted the room numbers as I passed them. 301, 307, 309, and finally, 313. The door was already cracked open. Inside, the room was oddly elegant burgundy wallpaper, antique furniture, clawfoot tub, a phonograph in the corner, no television, no clock, no minibar. But clean. Immaculate, even. I set my things down and immediately noticed something strange. There was no deadbolt. In fact, no way to lock the door from the inside at all, just the keyhole. Shrugging it off as an old hotel quirk, I tried the light switch. It worked, sort of. Dim yellow bulbs overhead flickered and buzzed, like they hadn't been touched in years. I sat on the bed, soft, cold. I pulled out my phone. No bars. Then the phone buzzed once. A notification: "You've checked in. Don't check out." I blinked. Tried to reread it. It was gone. That's when I noticed the mirror across from the bed. A tall, antique mirror, perfectly polished. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't moving exactly with me. It lagged a little, like it was watching me, not mimicking me. I waved. My reflection waved half a second later. I turned the mirror around to face the wall. That's when I heard it. A knock, not at the door, inside the wall. 3 soft thumps. Behind the headboard, I froze. It happened again. Then a child's voice. "Mommy, there's someone in my room." I backed away slowly and picked up the phone again. Still no signal. I tried the landline on the desk. No dial tone. I opened the door to the hallway, but the hallway was pitch black. No lights, just darkness, stretching in both directions. Like the hotel didn't have an end. I stepped back into the room and tried to close the door. It wouldn't shut. That's when the lights in the room went out. For a moment, everything was black. My heartbeat was the only thing I could hear. Then, the record player in the corner clicked on. A haunting violin melody began playing, slow, dissonant, out of tune. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, and as the screen lit up, I saw it, words scratched into the inside of the window. This room doesn't exist. I turned to the mirror again, now facing the wall, but there was something behind it, a reflection of the door, slowly opening on its own. I bolted toward it, yanked it open, and found myself staring into a hallway I hadn't seen before. Not the one I'd walked in from. This was older, dirtier, covered in ash, with peeling wallpaper and scorch marks on the ceiling, and down at the far end, silhouetted by red light, something was crawling toward me. Backwards, I slammed the door shut and locked it with the key. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred, and then silence. I woke up in the morning. The door was open again. The hallway looked normal. I packed my things and ran. Here's where it gets worse. When I told my coworkers the story, they laughed and said I must have been dreaming. But I still had the key in my jacket pocket. When I searched online for the Hill region again, nothing. No website, no business listing, nothing on maps. I even called the town's tourism board, and the woman who answered hesitated when I asked about it. She whispered, "That place burned down in 1993. There were no survivors in room 313. Now I keep the key in a locked box at home, but sometimes late at night, I swear I hear the phonograph music playing from inside the box." And once, just once, I saw the reflection in my bathroom mirror, waving back a half-second late. Let's move to our second story. The man who wasn't in the group photo. It started out like any perfect fall reunion, 8 friends, a rented lodge in the Vermont mountains, and a weekend full of beer, bonfires, and nostalgia. We hadn't seen each other in years. Life had dragged us in different directions, jobs, marriages, kids, but something about the idea of reliving those college memories pulled us all together again. The lodge was huge, rustic, beautiful, the kind of place with thick wooden beams, stone fireplaces, and creaking floors that you'd call charming before the sun went down. It was remote, no cell signal, no nearby towns, just endless trees and a lake shrouded in fog. Honestly, it was perfect. It felt like we had escaped the world. That Saturday night, someone suggested we take a group photo on the back deck, just something to remember the weekend by. We used Jamie's phone. He propped it on a table, set the 10-second timer, and ran over to join us. We all crammed together, arms around shoulders, wide smiles and goofy poses. Flash, done. It felt normal, innocent. We never thought that a simple photo could unravel everything. Later that night, while scrolling through his camera roll, Jamie paused. He called us over. At first, no one noticed what he was seeing, but as he zoomed in, the mood shifted instantly. There were 9 people in the picture. 9. One more than there should have been. We were only 8 in the middle of the group. Just behind Emma and Cal stood a man. His face was pale, drawn, almost corpse-like. His hood was pulled low, but his eyes stared directly at the camera, vacant, emotionless. He didn't smile. He didn't touch anyone, and no one remembered seeing him there. We stared at the image in silence. Some of us tried to rationalize. It may be a stranger wandered into frame. Maybe it was a visual glitch, a light trick. But there was no one else around. No staff, no neighbors, just us. Jamie said he had double-checked the timer and the angle. No one was behind us when the photo was taken. He was sure. We laughed it off. Uneasy laughter, the kind you force when you're trying not to believe what your gut is telling you. We made some dumb jokes, called him the party crasher ghost. Tried to name him, but the fun didn't last. That night, Jamie didn't sleep. The next morning, he looked pale. He said he kept hearing someone walking outside his window. Thought it was one of us messing with him, but it wasn't. None of us had been up. That night, he kept his curtains shut tight. Still, he claimed he could hear breathing outside, whispering. The next day, he had deep bags under his eyes, twitchy, paranoid. He wouldn't let go of his phone, just kept staring at that picture. By the third night, Jamie was different. Quiet, distant. He sat alone by the fireplace, staring into the flames. When we tried to talk to him, he just muttered, "He's not in the picture anymore." We thought he meant the photo changed, so we checked. The man was still there. But Jamie insisted, "He's not in the picture anymore, because now he's..." In the lodge, we all tried to calm him down. Thought he was sleep-deprived, drunk, or playing some elaborate prank. But in the morning, he was gone. His bed was made. His phone was still on the nightstand. The back door was slightly open. We searched the woods, the lake, everywhere. Nothing. No footprints, no belongings missing, no sign of struggle, just ... gone. We called the police, but the nearest town was nearly an hour away, and the local authorities treated it like a case of a grown man disappearing by choice. But we knew Jamie. He wouldn't just walk away. Not like that. One of the lodge caretakers, an older woman named Ruth, arrived to assist the search. When she saw the photo, she turned pale and sat down without a word. She eventually told us softly, like she wasn't supposed to, that a guest had disappeared from the same lodge decades ago. A man who had gone mad after a similar group retreat. No trace was ever found. People in town had whispered about it for years, though. Called him the extra guest. We left that day shaken. Jamie was never found. Back home, we promised each other to forget it, to move on. But that picture, it stayed with us. A few weeks later, Emma, one of the girls in the photo, called me in a panic. She swore she saw the man from the picture on the subway. Not someone who looked like him. Him, the exact face. Just standing silently among the crowd, not moving, not blinking. Then he vanished. Cal said he woke up one night to see the man standing at the foot of his bed, watching. When he turned on the light, he was gone. But his phone, a new one now, had that same photo as the lock screen, and he didn't put it there. I thought it was psychological trauma, mass paranoia. But then, I looked through the original photo on my laptop, and froze. There were now 10 people in it, 10, and I wasn't in it anymore. Let's move to our third story. The static between stations. I used to work as a night shift security guard for an old television, BROAD, CAST, tower, tucked deep in upstate New York, the kind of isolated facility surrounded by miles of dense forest and silence. The kind of place that doesn't even show up on GPS, with winding roads that vanish in fog and no cell signal past a certain mile marker. I took the job because it paid well and required almost no interaction. Just keep an eye on the monitors, file daily reports, and don't let anyone pass the outer gates. That was it. Most nights passed in cold quiet, with the only sounds being the hum of equipment and the occasional scratch of wind against the glass. But one night, in early February, during a brutal snowstorm, something changed. It was around 2:41 a.m. I remember because I was mid-log, writing down that everything was normal when the radio on my desk, which was turned off, suddenly burst to life. At first it was just static. Loud, distorted, grating static. But then it began shifting frequencies on its own, as if someone was twisting the dial, except no one was there. That's when I heard it, a voice beneath the noise. Faint, buried, under the crackle, but speaking clearly. My name, James. Again, James. Then several voices, all layered together, repeating my name, almost singing it in a low whispering chant. The monitors all flickered and turned black at the same time. No signal, no input. Just black. And then, slowly a single image returned. On one of them, but it wasn't the exterior camera feed. It was a hallway. A long, dimly lit hallway I didn't recognize, with dirty white tile floors, flickering red emergency lights overhead, and something like a wet shadow pooling near the center. I leaned in, confused, trying to figure out which feed this was. Our system only had 4 external cameras, all pointing toward fences and gates. But this hallway looked like it was inside. As I stared at the monitor, I noticed movement. A woman stepped into frame from the far end, pale, barefoot, wearing what looked like a torn hospital gown. Her arms hung at her sides like they were broken, her fingers dragging along the wall, and her head Her head was tilted to one side, at an unnatural angle, like her neck had snapped. She kept walking toward the camera, with that same strange, slow rhythm, and though the hallway had no microphone, I swear I could hear the wet slap of her feet echoing through the booth. And then she stopped, looked directly into the camera lens, and the feed cut again. I sat frozen, pulse hammering. My breath came in sharp, terrified gasps. I reached for the radio, now dead silent. The screen on it was blank, no lights. I picked it up, it was still unplugged. That's when I heard a tap behind me. Just one, then another. Slow and deliberate, on the glass of the booth's door. I turned around. She was standing outside, inches away. Same gown, same broken tilt of the head. Only now, her face was clearer. Her eyes were completely white. Her lips torn and stitched at the corners, like someone had tried to stop her from opening her mouth. But she did. Her jaw dropped wide, far wider than humanly possible. And from inside came the same static I'd heard earlier, but louder now, layered with distorted screams and garbled words. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. My entire body felt paralyzed, like I'd been hit with an electric shock. And then everything shattered. Not the glass, not the monitors, reality itself. The booth around me dissolved into a white noise. Void, and I found myself floating in what looked like an infinite network of identical towers, each one flickering in and out of visibility, like they were being poorly transmitted, and in each tower stood a version of me, slightly different. One had no eyes. Another was screaming. One was on fire. And in every version, that same woman stood behind me, whispering into my ear through a mouth full of static and teeth. When I came to, I was back in the booth. It was morning. The storm had passed. Everything looked normal, but my shift logs were missing. The monitors showed full footage for the night. No interruption, no strange hallway, no intruder. I asked the company for a system audit. They looked at me like I was insane. Said they had no employee on file by my name. I sent them my ID badge. The photo came out black, completely blank. Just one phrase where my name should be. Transmission in progress. Since then, every night, at exactly 2:41 a.m., my home radio turns on by itself. I've unplugged it, replaced it, even thrown it away. It doesn't matter. It finds me. The static starts quietly, then the voices come. Sometimes it speaks my name. Sometimes it just laughs. And sometimes, I hear other voices, people I love, my sister, my mother, my own voice, calling me from the other side, saying things I never said, responding to thoughts I haven't spoken aloud. I don't know what. I tuned into that night. I don't know if it was a ghost, a glitch in reality, or something deeper, something that rides frequencies and slips through our airwaves, wearing human skin and mimicking lost voices. But I know one thing. If you ever hear your name whispered between radio stations, don't answer. Because once you hear them, they never stop listening. Let's move to our fourth story. The last tenant, when I signed the lease for apartment 304, it felt like I'd stumbled upon a hidden gem. Top floor, decent square footage, and half the rent of comparable units in Queens. The only catch: the landlord was oddly eager to seal the deal. He barely asked for references, shoved the keys into my hand before the ink was dry. "Don't worry about the last tenant," he said with a faint grimace. "She just left." That should have been my first red flag, but I was broke, desperate, and honestly relieved to have a place to sleep that wasn't my car. The apartment was eerily clean, like it had been scrubbed within an inch of its life. No dust, no trace of previous life, except for a deep scratch in the hardwood near the bathroom door. And one odd thing: every mirror in the apartment had been removed. I asked about it, but the landlord only said the old ones were cracked, that he'd get around to replacing them. He never did. The first night was uneventful, if quiet. The second night, I woke around 2:30 a.m. to the distinct sound of keys turning in my front door. Not loud, slow, intentional. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed, and tiptoed into the hallway. But the door was locked, deadbolt still in place. No one there. I chalked it up to dreaming. Thin walls, creaky pipes, Typical New York apartment stuff. But the next night, it happened again. And this time, it wasn't just the door. I heard soft footsteps pacing the living room, back and forth, heel to toe, with agonizing patience. I held my breath, heart pounding. Then silence. But when I turned on the light, I found something that hadn't been there before. A single, dirty footprint near the couch. Barefoot, human, and it wasn't mine. The landlord didn't respond to my calls. So the next morning, I knocked on my neighbor's door, an older woman named Lucia. She looked surprised when I said I was staying in 304. That apartment's cursed. She said without sarcasm. I haven't seen anyone last longer than a few months in there. They always leave. One just vanished. I asked about the woman who lived there before me. Lucia lowered her voice. She used to talk about noises in the walls. Said someone was watching her. Everyone thought she was mentally ill. Until she disappeared. Left everything behind. Didn't even take her shoes. Back in my apartment, I began noticing small changes. A lamp would be on when I was sure I'd turned it off. The window, always shut, would be cracked open. One morning, I found all the kitchen drawers pulled open wide, perfectly aligned. That night, I heard whispering through the air vent. Not words. Just breathy syllables. Like something trying to speak without a tongue. Things escalated quickly after that. One evening, while moving furniture to set up a bookshelf, I discovered a note tucked behind the radiator. It was yellowed with age, the handwriting jagged and panicked. It read, "Don't listen to the walls. Don't sleep facing the vent. Don't acknowledge the woman in the mirror." The vent. I hadn't noticed one in the bedroom before, mostly because it had been painted over. I scraped away the layers of paint and pried off the cover. Inside, the smell hit me instantly, like mildew and something rotten. I shined my phone flashlight into the dark duct. At first I saw nothing. But then, just as I was about to pull away, two eyes blinked back at me. Pale, lidless, unblinking. I staggered back, dropped my phone, and slammed the vent shut. From that night on, I didn't sleep properly. Every time I drifted off, I heard her, the whispering woman. Her voice came from behind the walls, murmuring in broken phrases. Sometimes, she cried. Sometimes she laughed, soft and hollow. But worst of all was the scratching. Slow, deliberate scratches against the wall behind my bed, as if someone was inside the drywall, dragging their nails along the inner frame. One night, I built up the nerve to record audio while I slept. I left my phone on the nightstand, screen down, and tried to sleep. The next morning, I found a file. Recording the first hour was normal. The second had faint whispers. But by hour 3, the whispers turned to breathing, then footsteps, then singing. A woman's voice humming a lullaby I didn't recognize. Then, suddenly, she spoke. He never left. Neither will you. I left the apartment that morning and checked into a hotel. But curiosity got the better of me. I searched for old tenant records online and found the name Madeline Gray, the same woman Lucia had mentioned. She'd filed multiple noise complaints, all mentioning someone inside the walls. Her last complaint, just weeks before vanishing, read, "There's a woman who lives in the mirror. She watches me sleep." I decided to return one last time to retrieve my things. Olivia, my closest friend, came with me. We entered during daylight, but even then, the apartment felt darker than it should have. While packing, Olivia froze. "Did you leave this open?" she asked, pointing to the bathroom mirror. It was cracked, but I hadn't put one up, and behind the crack, I swear I saw a face that wasn't mine, watching, smiling. On the floor beside the mirror was a lipstick tube. Written on the glass were the words, "I'm not alone." That was it. We left immediately. I never went back. A week later, I saw a new listing pop up on the apartment website. Same unit, same photos. No mention of prior tenants. It was as if I'd never been there. The description ended with one sentence. "Quiet building. Long-term availability." I reported it. No one responded. The listing is still up, and sometimes, late at night, I still hear humming. Even here. Let's move to our fifth story. I had just moved into a small, oddly shaped apartment above an antique bookstore in a quiet, almost forgotten part of Manhattan. The neighborhood was the kind that felt stuck in time. No chain stores, no noise, just narrow streets and buildings too old for comfort. The bookstore below was always dimly lit and smelled like mold and burning paper. I didn't mind. The rent was cheap, and after losing my job, I didn't have many options. The landlord was an unsettling man. He had a hunched back, cataract eyes and spoke like he'd forgotten how human speech worked. When I signed the lease, he stared at me a little too long and said, "Don't open the trapdoor." I thought he meant it metaphorically, like don't cause problems. I laughed. He didn't. I didn't see any trapdoor at first. The apartment was small, just a living room, bedroom, tiny kitchen, and a bathroom with rust-stained tiles. The floor was wooden, uneven, and always cold. After a few days of settling in, I noticed a faded old rug in the far corner of the living room. It didn't match the rest of the place. Beneath it, the boards were slightly raised in a perfect square about 3 feet across. In the center was an old iron ring, the trapdoor. I hesitated to touch it. The warning from the landlord came back, and suddenly, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. Still, curiosity is a hell of a thing. I didn't try to open it, not then. I just lifted the rug, stared at the outline, ran my hand across the cold wood. It was like it had no business being there, not part of the apartment. Something added, long after the building was built. That night, things changed. I started hearing sounds not the usual old building creaks. These were deliberate, scraping, like nails on the underside of wood. Sometimes a heavy thud, like someone slamming their hand against the floor from below. I told myself it was the old pipes, the heating system, rats, anything until I found the rug moved. I had folded it neatly back over the trapdoor, but in the morning, it was wrinkled and pushed aside. Not by a person, but like something emerged from underneath and didn't care to hide its tracks. I taped the rug down that day, duct tape on all corners. That night, I didn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., I remember the time exactly, I heard the tape tearing, slowly, one corner at a time. Like it knew I was listening. Like it wanted me to know it was awake. I grabbed a flashlight and stood in the hallway staring at it. I didn't dare go into the living room, but I saw something that shouldn't be possible. The wood of the trapdoor was bowing upward, like something heavy was pressing against it from below. I watched, breath held, and I swear to you, I saw 5 deep, spidery imprints, a hand, long fingers, like something was pushing upward, trying to lift the wood. I locked myself in the bathroom that night and sat on the edge of the tub with a knife. In my hand, morning came, and the trapdoor was closed. But the rug was crumpled and torn. The duct tape shredded like paper. I confronted the landlord the next day. Asked him straight up what was under the floor. His face twitched. He said only one thing before walking away: it doesn't like attention. The next 2 nights were the worst of my life. The scratching turned to dragging, like something moving slowly around under the floorboards. I started seeing shadows pass beneath the door cracks, and the apartment grew unnaturally cold, like I was in a freezer. No heat, no matter how high I turned the dial. Then the smell began, rot, damp flesh, like a body left to ferment in a sealed box. I tried to sleep with a blanket over my head, headphones blasting static, but I could still feel it, something watching me. I dreamt of the trap door swinging open, of limbs crawling out, thin as wire, joints bending the wrong way. On the 4th night, I woke to the sound of the trapdoor slamming shut, like it had been opened and dropped suddenly. My door creaked open a few minutes later. I hadn't moved. No wind, nothing. Just silence. I left that day, didn't pack. Just walked out with my coat and phone. I didn't speak to the landlord. I didn't even look back. I took the train to my sister's place and crashed on her couch for a week. But then, something happened. I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace one morning, and a listing caught my eye. Affordable Manhattan apartment, recently vacant. I clicked. It was my apartment. Same photos. Same layout. But the last image, one that hadn't been there before, showed the corner of the living room where the rug used to be. The floorboards were bare. In the center, the trapdoor was wide open. Inside, just visible in the shadow, was a face. Not human, long stretched, all teeth, smiling.